A bit, yeah.
Anybody from your seats?
Not enough people. Much less.
We have many controversial topics, I think, that the room will be enough.
You think?
We have many controversial topics that the room will be enough.
Why,
that's what I'm here for.
By the way, on the topic of issues in the issue tracker for the various documents, it might make sense for you guys to actually present the issue tracker at least for the next issue thing, so that, like, we don't. I think I'm going to want to go through issue tracker stuff on advertising proxy. I know that's go on.
You're saying we should share the
Yeah, so you guys have access to it, and you're not going to be talking, so like it might make it a little easier in terms of the presentation. You know, it's a sort of weird thing, but
I guess we can do that.
Hi everyone. So we'll start in a minute. So we're just sorting out how we're going to present the issues, the open issues we're going to go through for later in this session. So I was thinking that Esco, are you still willing to share from your screen? Yeah, because I mean, Ted, you were thinking.
it's just sort of logistically challenging because if we're sharing our screen and talking, that I think that the thing that would be sort of most flowy would be for one person to be sharing their screen and controlling the chaining of issues, another person to be taking notes on the issue as we discuss them, and the third person to be the presenter who's talking. I think that's likely to be easier.
Okay, yeah, we can help by sharing. Yeah. You're going to cover that? Sorry,
Yeah,
Florian.
yeah.
Yeah, right, Florian. Okay. It's yeah. Okay. Okay, let's get started then. Welcome to DNSSD. This being an IETF session, it's covered by the note well. So by participating, you agree to follow these policies. Please make sure you're familiar with all of them because they're important. I'm not sure that everybody in this room, oh no, it's improved. So hopefully everyone in this room has signed into Mitoco. If you haven't, please do so. So that we know you're in the room and you can join the queue or message in the chat. So I am Chris Box and my co-chair is...
I'm Florian Opser.
So are there any volunteers to contribute to taking the notes? I've pre-prepared them with, thank you, Peter. Oh, having two people is great because it means, yeah, if one wants to come up to the mic line, then the other can cover. So thank you. Here we have some useful links if you need to refer to them later. We do have a GitHub organization and several documents can be found there and you can submit pull requests or issues there. Likewise, you can do that on the main list. If you have a draft that you want to get added, contact the chairs to get set up. And this is the first meeting since we published SRP and update lease. So they were published as RFCs on the 12th of June. And as you can see there, we have, they were in the works a long time. So 2017, we had that first draft of SRP. And yeah, 28 different revisions as a working group draft. So thank you for all your contributions. I think we've got a good document there, and it's great to see. Ted says 8 years isn't that long. But we've got more to do. So this is what we're planning to cover in this session. So first of all, quickly discuss what we're going to do on the charter, then multiple queue types, which is also probably going to be quick. Then we're going to go through on time since received, discussing how we want to go forward on those open issues, similarly for advertising proxy. And then finally, at the end, we've got Donald Leestate will join us because he wants to see if there's any interest in making improvements to SIG0, which is obviously a component that SRP relies on. So there's more information on that later. Any requests to bash this agenda?
Can we just add a quick PSA for the full service DNSSD server? I don't want to have a long talk about it, but just so people know that we're presenting.
We are going to mention that at the end, yes. So just for everyone's information, there's in SNAC tomorrow, there will be a presentation. We do, yes. Actually, I'll go to that now. So, so yes, so in SNAC tomorrow morning, Ted, did you want to say what that is going to cover, just so people know whether they want to go to that meeting?
Yeah, so this is actually covering a topic that has been near and dear to our hearts for a long time, but we finally have a use case that demands it as opposed to sort of something that we maybe want to do. The use case being a Wi-Fi device that's operating on battery and doesn't want to be sitting there listening for multicasts all the time. A device like that basically is similar to like a constrained network device in that it wants to do some kind of quick transaction that's preferably unicast, and then that will advertise its services and and then also be able to do service discovery. So this is going to be talking about a way that we could specify how that works on a Wi-Fi link, and yeah, so I don't want to go into a lot of details here, obviously, but if you are curious about that, please come to SNAC tomorrow.
Thank you. So, yeah, so that was our agenda. So the first item is the charter. So the charter of the working group is now 6 years old, and it's quite long. It's got 300 words of background. It then goes on to 200 words of working group description, and it outlines those goals there. And so in discussion with Eric as the AD, so we're thinking, yeah, it is time to refresh that charter. So we need to, it needs to be reset around what we need to do going forward. So, because there's a lot of text there about what we intend to do, and that was written before we had done what we've done. So it's just a heads up, really. We're going to do that. If you've got any particular thoughts on what should go into the new charter, then please let us know. You can mention it now. You can come up to the mic line if you want to mention it now, or you can let us know separately. But obviously the new charter will at least a minimum need to cover the scope of progressing our active documents, which are listed there, and it's an open question as what else is there anything else that should be in there? So, Eric, did you want to say anything? No. Okay, that's fine.
So, Rick, the responsibility for this, like we discussed, right? We need to review the charter. Something we need to keep is maintenance, or online about maintenance of existing protocols, just in case.
Yes.
In addition of covering the current job, and maybe other people in the room, Chris, to cover things that are coming, and maybe the guy behind me has ideas of what's coming.
Ted.
Yeah, I am that guy, Ted Lemon. Yeah, so actually that's a really good point. If we're not talking about, and I guess we aren't talking about maintenance specifically, I mean, we say sort of issues that come up, and so that's sort of maintenance, but yeah. SRP already has a couple of outstanding issues on it. Nothing terrifying, just like there are a couple things that we could do to improve it that would actually make it less susceptible to replay attacks in cases where the device that's doing SRP registration doesn't have a clock. And this is something that we unfortunately discovered about a week ago. And so, yeah. And there may even be, it may even be worth talking about an extension of the protocol that actually fully implements replay protection, even if the device doesn't have a clock, as opposed to just sort of the quick hack that I was referring to just now. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff like that that is just like, you know, yeah, quality of implementation. We've learned stuff in the implementation. Let's fix it.
Ray?
Yeah, Ray Bellis, ISC. Just on the rechartering, I suggest it might be a little bit simpler doing the rechartering text if multi-queue types is finished first, so you don't have to try to accommodate it in the
Hopefully it
charter.
will be, yeah. Right. So back to the agenda. So on the question of multiple queue types, yes, we concluded the working group last call. I don't see Tommy Jensen in this. So he raised a couple of issues. I believe he's changed his thinking on that. So we'll need to follow up separately and just go through the usual process of how do we do the Shepherd write-up and AD review. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. Did you? No. Okay. So yes, it is. Ray, you got something?
Okay, sorry. So am I to understand that Tommy's told you off list that he doesn't need that second point addressing anymore?
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
okay. Yeah, I mean, I spoke to him last Sunday, and at that point he was saying, well, he could suggest text, but then he hadn't actually done so. But most other people didn't seem to think it was required. So.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
I would just like to hear from Tommy, and I will prod him that he just says something on the mailing list. Sorry, because we are mostly putting words in his mouth. No, that's not nice.
So where we actually stand is, yes. So there were points that were raised. They need to be addressed, and it's just come out with what is the way we are going to address them. And one possible outcome is there is no change, or we make some small change, but it's all relatively minor. So, unless there's anything else, let's go on to time since received. Are you able to?
I don't know. I've not tried it.
Well, yeah, give it a go. Yeah. So, Florian's going to share the. All right, so I'll stop sharing.
You want to share a screen? Yes, I want. Okay.
Yes, so we're just sharing the issues on screen.
You're waiting for me to actually share the screen? Maybe
Yeah,
you start talking before.
I can start talking for sure. Let's see. This works, right? It's okay like this. Hi, I'm Esko Dijk. We don't have any slides for TSR. The idea was just to go through open issues and pull requests as we've recorded them on GitHub. I must. Okay. Like this. I don't know how it works. Maybe here. This one. Now it's maybe too high again. Okay, this looks good. So, right. So saying we have issues recorded and also pull requests. Last time I looked, there was one pull request and just a couple of issues. And then I looked again. Ted managed to add many issues in the last hour. So that's just in time. We are going to try to share those on the screen just so that everyone can follow along with issues. But it's also possible to do a Google for a GitHub DNSSD TSR, those terms, and you will also find it. So you can look at the issues yourself. I did become an author of this draft, and the first thing I did was convert it from XML format to a Markdown format. So we're going to use that, which could also be useful for doing pull requests with text. So it's a bit easier to get the text right, avoid compilation errors in Markdown. So people who are wanting to contribute text or typos or whatever, feel free to do that. I've started with looking at, as a new author, looking at the existing concepts. So is it clear to me? Are they well defined? So I found that it would be useful to add a terminology section, which is quite common in drafts and RFCs to have, and we didn't have that yet. So just to recap all the terms. Hey, that was nice. I'm feeling recursive now. Yeah, so this is the list you see on screen here now, basically. So the lower issue, I think that's the oldest one, number 1 here. So that's basically to add terms in the terminology section to clarify these and also harmonize the terms where we can. So yeah, okay, now it's scrolling around a bit. Yeah, and number 3 is also for clarifying the terminology. So for that, I think it would be useful to also look at some point, look at the PR we have to see if we agree to that updated terminology and if we upgrade on the terms there. So Ted, did you have any particular issue you wanted to discuss here? Because I don't think we have time for all of them. So for me, it's basically showing the pull request about terminology would be useful, and just agree on that we use that. And if that's okay, I can continue with the editing. And maybe you have some more.
There might also be, you might also want to define, you have a registrar, but not registrant. And I don't remember if that's, I think that's required in TSR. So we should probably have that in the terminology section, but yeah.
Yeah, we have some terminology. We have, for example, there's an SRP, a registrar, that's taken directly from the SRP RFC, and we also have the term MDNS registrar here. So that's basically an MDNS process that advertises information on behalf of other processes. So it's like a proxy type of entity, basically. So that's the MDNS registrar. And well, maybe you can just start with going through the PR. Thanks, Florian, for showing it. So there are a couple of simple things. So just removing the capitals to get a consistent string, basically, for advertising proxy, also in line with other documents. So that's relatively easy. So we can maybe scroll down a bit. We have, for example, SRP requester with an O, and that's changing to SRP requester with an E to be compliant with the RFC terminology. So that's a bit of just a bit of simplification in the language and clarification. And maybe what we could do now is scroll a bit more down, because we have a list of terminology being added here. So that's the main part I wanted to show. I think it's at the end, somewhere at the end. Yeah, conventions, terms, and definitions, that part. So this is basically adding new terms in the section. So it will display as term and then an explanation of what it is. So I've made, there are some proposals what it is. So MDNS registrar, for example, it's describing what I just said. So that's an MDNS process that will do these advertisements, very likely including TSR option, to proxy basically for other services. So it advertises other services. And also things like what's a requester and a local requester are then identified there. I think I tried to guess how it was used in the draft before and then explain it in that way. And that's different. So the requester is different from the SRP requester, for example. Or it's a, yeah, SRP requester, you can say it's a specific type of requester that's not on the same device, but that used the service registration protocol to make a request for a registration. So this is basically, for me, the first thing I wanted to do in the next update to get the terminology clear before looking at changing any of the already defined features of this protocol.
So I noticed, I commented earlier about requester versus registrant, and I just checked in the document. And it turns out that there's one section where the term requester is used and another section where the term registrant is used to mean the same thing. So we should definitely unify that. I would suggest using registrant rather than requester, because we're already using requester for SRP, and so and that actually means something quite fundamentally different. It's a protocol entity as opposed to a process, and so I think registrant is probably going to make that more clear.
And then I think that the SRP requester can be the registrant, basically, because it's the entity making a request, unless we constrain it to local requesters only.
Right. So no, what's meant by registrant is the process that's on the machine that the MDNS responder is on, or MDNS registrar is on, that does the registration.
Okay. Yeah, then we can maybe drop this local as well, because there is only only a local registrant in that case.
We should figure out if there's a case where requester means non-local and fix that, because that's confusing.
Yeah, I don't think we have such a case yet, but well, you could define it as the registrant being the remote entity conceptually, but you could also define it as the local process, which is the SRP registrar, which becomes a requester itself to the MDNS registrar, right?
Yeah, so also you raised an issue about whether there are things other than proxies that do TSR, to which I think the answer is yes. And in that case, the thing that's doing TSR is probably also a registrant, but is not an SRP client, at least in that context.
Okay, yeah, that's how we can do it. So yeah, I mean, we keep the roles separate. So there's the MDNS registrar, I'm now mixing it up. So we have an SRP registrar, which is kind of the database that takes the SRP registrations, but itself doesn't have a means to advertise that on MDNS. That's what the MDNS process is doing, which we call, I think now, the MDNS registrar, if that's okay in terms of name. And we can always change it later if it's becoming too confusing. You could also call it MDNS process if you want, but okay. I don't mind that much, as long as we use it consistently for the time being. That should be okay. And then in terms, so if there are any further comments on this, please let us know. We can take this into account. I just wanted to highlight this, and I have only one remaining issue that could be raised here. So it's basically in the issues list, one I created today.
All right.
And that is basically the specific case discussed in IETF 122. When I had some slides, basically, that was the case. Maybe we need to scroll down a bit. Those are all created by Ted. And yeah, that's number 5 there. Yeah, use of TSR by a non-proxy MDNS publisher. So that basically raises the question. So suppose you have a device that registers with SRP, gets its services registered, all fine. Then the device changes network interface. So if it has a mesh network interface, it disables that or loses the connection suddenly, and then it can connect via a Wi-Fi interface. So getting directly on a link where MDNS is used and where basically the advertising proxy is also on. So what does the device do now? It wants to register its services again on that link on Wi-Fi using MDNS, but it has to compete with basically the proxied version of its own services that it had previously registered. So what happens there? So would it just advertise with MDNS and not use the TSR option, or could it use the TSR option there because it knows about it, obviously? What would happen also with the other devices receiving that message? So I think this was a case I wanted to just raise, that it's not fully clear to me yet what we want to happen here.
Yeah. So Ted Lemon again. So in addition to this, it's possible the device could be both on the mesh network and on Wi-Fi at the same time. And then we need to answer the question, maybe not in this draft, but somewhere, does it register in both places or only one, right? Because maybe, I mean, it has to do a bunch of thinking if it's going to register in only one place. Maybe it's better to have it register in both places, but then that's more MDNS traffic. And so there's we should figure out what the answer to that question is and make a recommendation. And then the other question is, suppose there's an SRP registrar on the Wi-Fi network, then, and maybe it's even the same registrar that's on the mesh network, yes, then it could just register with that regardless of which network it's on.
Yeah, that seems the best option, right? If the SRP registrar is also reachable over that Wi-Fi link, and then it just continues the registration there.
Yep.
Yeah. Do we need to consider the case where it's not? That's a good point as well. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously we're going to have devices that don't implement SRP. Like, for example, current thread border routers aren't receptive to SRP registrations. At least Apple ones aren't receptive to SRP registrations on Wi-Fi. And so if you had one of those, this wouldn't work. But, I think this is a bit of a hypothetical situation right now. So this is a good time to be talking about it because we can probably have an answer ready when somebody's actually doing it and, kind of get it all working.
Yeah, maybe you get similar cases if two independent devices would try to use the same name, but I think we have already described that case in the draft. Yeah, so maybe it's handled in a similar way then.
Yep.
Yeah. The only point was, well, this device has a right to keep using its services. It uses new IP addresses in that case, so it wants to get the registration through. But yeah, maybe the best thing to do is go to the SRP registrar and update it there. That sounds good to me as well. So this is what I wanted to highlight. So maybe unless Ted has any more closing comments or the new issues you added, like what do you want to do with that?
Yeah, so I added a bunch of new issues. Basically, this is like the classic problem. I'm coding before IETF, and then I get to IETF, and I have time to look at the draft, and it's like really late. But so I don't know if we really need to discuss all of these points. Basically, I'll just summarize what the goal of these was. We did an update to our TSR implementation in like spring of 2025. I think that fixed a bunch of sort of edge case issues that we ran into, and this is basically documenting those fixes. There was some unclarity in our implementation about whether things were stale or in conflict. We were using the time of processing instead of the time of receipt when constructing the absolute timestamp for TSR, and that turns out to create issues with things being seen as stale when they aren't, because sometimes it takes a while to process all of the stuff that you're doing if the network is busy. So just stuff like that. So these are things that I think would make sense to discuss on the list. I asked some questions in a number of these pull requests, and I'm happy to raise those on the mailing list so that we can discuss them on the mailing list. I don't think we really have time to discuss them here.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I will certainly look at them. So good.
So we do have a few more minutes to spend on TSR, if that would be helpful, or we could spend that time on advertising proxy.
I don't know. Do people want to discuss this stuff? I'm happy to if people want to. One of the things that I think is a pretty interesting one is number 6. So yeah, so there's actually two related topics, number 6 and I think number 7. So basically the issue is that when we publish things in MDNS, and then so we're adding a new record, but we already the information is already in cache. That means that it's already been advertised on the network, possibly recently. And so if we then probe it, that's completely useless because we already know that it's been published, right? We already know that it's valid. We already basically know what the answer to the probe should be. And additionally, so basically the idea is to just not send MDNS traffic in that case. And then if we look at issue 7, I think that's also related, a little bit more complicated. There's some fun stuff in here, we actually wound up discovering that there were some gaps in the API because of this. So here this is quite a bit more detail, but basically what's going on here is that if we get an MDNS registration, so this is a registrant publishing something on the local machine to advertise an MDNS on the network, and what's being registered is already present in cache, and we have newer data than what's in cache, or newer data than what's published. What's proposed here is, what's proposed in the document is that we do a probe. But if there haven't been any changes, doing a probe is a waste of time. It's already out there. So this is an analysis of the scenarios where this happens and whether there's a case where we would need to do a probe, and therefore we basically would have to do it always. I came to the conclusion that we don't ever need to probe here. So I think it would be really helpful if folks in the working group who are kind of up on how MDNS works could look at this and see if they agree with my analysis. I did a fairly thorough analysis, so even if you're not really clear on this stuff, I think you can probably follow along and theorize about it. So that would be really appreciated. I don't think we can do a full analysis here. I'm not going to read this 5 paragraphs, but I just wanted to call attention to that because I think that's one of the more interesting technical issues that I raised today. And then what else is on the list? Yeah. So another thing that might be worth calling people's attention to, I don't know if there's anybody here who's doing MDNS implementations. I know there's somebody here who might be hacking on one. So I'll just mention it. That's issue number 11. Let me know if we're running out of time. So in issue 11, the issue is that when you're publishing a bunch of new stuff, it can wind up being bigger than a single MDNS packet. And when that happens, the data winds up getting split across multiple packets. And it can happen that data for a particular owner name gets split across 2 different packets. traditional MDNS, when it sees this, will see that as a conflict, even if the data, if you aggregated it, if you put the two pieces that have been split apart together, wouldn't be seen as a conflict. And so the point of this text is to just describe that scenario in some detail and point out that because we're doing stale versus not stale rather than conflict versus not conflict, we don't need to do that at all. Like, that's just totally irrelevant. We can just check to see whether the new data that or the data that we're seeing is stale or not. If it's stale, we drop it or possibly respond with a, that's stale, stop it. Or if it's not stale, if it's new and our data is stale, then we flush our data and replace it with the new data. And we don't have to worry about whether that data is incomplete, because the rest of the data will come in the next update, which we will also treat the same way. And therefore, we won't have a problem with, we'll wind up with a complete data set. So this is a simplification that we added in the spring release, and it reduced the amount of sort of churn that we got from seeing fake conflicts substantially. So this is very much worth doing in TSR implementations. So I think that's everything that I need to talk about. I don't know if anybody wants to dig in deeper.
If anyone's got any thoughts on anything that was mentioned for TSR, then join the queue. Otherwise, yeah, please have a think about it offline.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who feels interested in this stuff and wants to go read these issues, that would be very helpful.
Okay, should we look at the advertising proxy issues then?
So, well, I guess I could get up there.
Do you want to start there or all the way down?
Most of the stuff that's all the way down is relatively trivial, but let's just review for sure to make sure. Yeah. So, sorry. So obviously we've concluded on QD count. So that one's addressed. We can just do whatever that says to do. I don't know what issue number 1 is. Oh, that's something that ESCO raised. What does that say?
ESCO is coming up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there was the naming issue basically. Yeah? So we have an advertising proxy function within a bigger thing that's also called advertising proxy. So that was a bit of recursiveness.
So it's interesting, that list there, I don't think that's in the document anymore, is it? Maybe it is, I don't know. That list is actually identical to the list that's in the document for the full service DNSSD server.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. It probably got taken out of the draft by now then.
Yeah, I think that was when we were trying to do the full service thing in the advertising proxy document. So it's actually like, it's kind of a weird callback. It hadn't occurred to me that we're actually we had said, let's just make the advertising proxy document the advertising proxy function and nothing else. And we now have a new document that documents all of these and how they operate together, which actually addresses what we ripped out of the advertising proxy document ages ago. So I think we can close this issue. But ESCO, I'll leave that to you to figure out.
I can do a final check then. Also for the other one, number 2,
yeah. Okay, so let's see what else we got. TTL value to advertise. I don't know how important.
Do you want me to click through, or do you recall it?
This happened a long time ago. Well, March 31st wasn't that long ago, but that was Bangkok, I guess. So. So we had a discussion about this ESCO in the thread group, and I think we came to a conclusion there. So maybe we could, rather than discussing this at length here, we could figure out what we concluded in the thread group and see if it's applicable here, and if so, then just report that to the working group. And the working group can say, no, you guys are crazy, or whatever.
Yeah, if you have something like a summary in mind, then please go ahead.
I can't remember what we concluded, but it was something along the lines of that the TTL shouldn't be hugely longer than or shorter than the lease time, but that they're two independent entities and shouldn't be considered to be equivalent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So it started, I think, because you would assume, like, if we don't say anything about TTL, then the standard MDNS TTL advice would be followed. And I think we already concluded that that's maybe not applicable in all cases. So we need to say something about it in the text itself.
Yeah. As an example, the advice in RFC 6762, I think, for host names is to have them with a very short TTL. And when you're advertising the host from an advertising proxy, that really doesn't make much sense. So, yeah. Let's see. We actually have some text here about clarifying the switch that ESCO added. So that's basically the same issue we were talking about before. So one thing, I think this is actually probably something that's worth talking about here. So I had a harebrained scheme a couple of IETFs ago to avoid MDNS conflicts by basically doing subdomains of .local. So in other words, if you register, a service using SRP, then that would not be published as, hostname.local, but rather hostname.default.service.arpa.local or something like that. And what that does is it eliminates name conflicts because the owner of the default.service.arpa zone is authoritative for that zone and can resolve name conflicts there.
Are you asking about, you're talking about issue 8?
This is issue 10.
10.
Yeah.
We're going to 10. Okay.
Sorry. So that seemed like a really clever idea at the time, and I think it's technically correct, but what I've been noticing is that there are a lot of scenarios where that would just totally fail. So we would actually wind up doing something to solve a relative edge case that would cause failures almost all the time for certain applications. For example, Matter would totally fail with this. And Matter is a big user of MDNS, and we don't want it to totally fail, or a big user of advertising proxies, and we don't want it to totally fail. So, so I think that it would be, first of all, it would be a big simplification of the document to just take that text out. And secondly, I think that we should take that text out because I don't think it really does us much good. What we really want to wind up with in the long run, and what I think we will wind up with in the long run, is nobody's using the advertising proxy anymore. That's what we want. The advertising proxy is there because we're kind of stuck having to do it because there are devices that don't support SRP registration, basically, and that don't support service discovery to sort of an arbitrary ad hoc, like a thread border router or a stub router. And so having the advertising proxy gets us over that gap, but ultimately we want to get over that gap by doing all of these queries over DNS. And then we have like the DNS zone hierarchy and everything. At that point, things that are doing queries using DNS have to behave correctly. When the name is like, a complicated multi-subdomain name as opposed to just foo.local. So, so I think that, I think we can take that stuff out pretty safely, and it makes our lives a lot simpler.
So, anyone got any thoughts on whether it's safe to remove mentions of collisions that Ted's referring to?
So my point wasn't to remove the mentions of the collisions,
but removing text.
What I'm talking about is removing the text that describes the weird domain hierarchy stuff that I came up with as a way to solve this problem. Like, it's a pure solution, right? It's like a really nice, elegant solution, but advertising proxies aren't elegant. And I think trying to put too much elegance in the advertising proxy is kind of, it's putting the elegance in the wrong place. So.
Okay. Do you want to go back to the issues?
Yeah, and then another question that came up is, right now the document says that if you're an advertising proxy and you don't know how to tell what link a link local address is valid on, then you must always advertise it. And
I know we had some good reasons for thinking that was the case, but the problem with that is that the link local address, if the link local address is advertised when it shouldn't be, it's actually kind of expensive because that's the address that is most preferred for connecting. And so the device that's connecting to it is going to use that address first. And there's going to be a certain amount of time spent waiting for that address connection to fail before we move on. So I think that we shouldn't. I think that we should actually change this from must to must not, which is very exciting. Because so basically the idea here is if you know how to tell what link the link local address is valid on, and you know how to tell where the query is going, which you kind of do, right? You can, with MDNS, you can say only advertise this on this link. So we are able to do that. So if you're able to do that, then just advertise it on the link where it's valid, because it's always better to use link local address if you can. But if you aren't able to tell, don't advertise the link local address, because there's a very real possibility that will lead to dysfunction.
Maybe just a question on that. So if the SRP client basically registers a link local address, so do we actually have a decision there as well? So whether it will include or not include that address? Because you're assuming that it would include it now, I think. Or?
Yeah. So in the case of Thread border routers, we don't get that. We don't even get the mesh local address normally, because Thread has a specification about what to do when you're registering, and you normally don't register your mesh local address. But in the case of a Wi-Fi SRP client, I think we would want it to register the link local address, because it's, it may be the best address to contact it with. Yep. And so if we have sort of the full service DNSSD server, then I think it's better to just insist that server actually do the work to figure out what interface things are correctly advertised on, and only advertise them on those interfaces, rather than rather than basically just kind of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best.
Okay, but how would that basically server know that basically the advertising proxy doesn't need to try the address or neighbor discovery, see if it's there on the link?
Yeah, so we would need to specify that, but the way that I would expect it to work is that it knows what link the registration came from. Okay. And it knows whether the device that did the registration is on link. Probably the device used its link local address to do the registration. So we can literally just look at the source address of the registration a lot of times, or if not, we can look at the source address and see if it's on link. And if it's on link, then we know that's the link that link local addresses are valid on in this SRP registration. And then this is a little bit complicated because representing that in a standard DNS zone is a little bit hard. So we need to have a little bit of metadata that carries that information. But then the other thing is that the full service DNS resolver, full service DNSSD service document talks about how to do queries that are for stuff that's on your local link. And so there's a specific way to do that. And if you do that specific query, then we have this ability to match and say, okay, this query is for stuff that works on this link. This is on this link, so we can use it. Or this is not on this link, so we can't use it.
Yeah, so for the context of purely the advertising proxy, it's a little bit of metadata that tells the proxy where the information came from.
Right.
So then can use that.
Yeah. So in the case of the advertising proxy, obviously we're advertising that data on a specific link or just on all links. And for link local addresses, we want to advertise on a specific link if we know what that link is.
Okay, well, sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, go back. How are we doing for time?
Coming to the end of this section.
Okay, well, let's, I think we can maybe, is it EDNS 0, or sorry, 6.0 next?
It's Is there one final one you want to do here? Or?
Do we have another one?
Yeah, can do.
Oh, okay. Let's see. So, yeah. Oh, actually, that's a good one. The SRP replication one. That's number 9. So we haven't actually standardized SRP replication. So this is, from a standards perspective, this is a bit academic yet. But basically, if we're doing SRP replication, what we're doing is we're replicating a DNS zone using the replication protocol. And that DNS zone is known to be correct once a full SRP replication synchronization has completed with a server that is already advertising it. So basically, there's like this sort of sense of that, like there's one server that's advertising it, that server is kind of the authority, and then when I come along as a second server and synchronize with that server, I'm not an authority until the synchronization is complete. And at that point, we're both authorities. And we have a peer-to-peer protocol for maintaining the database once there are multiple authorities. So the point of this is that if we have an advertising proxy that's advertising this replicated database, we only want to advertise it when we're authoritative. And so that state of authority, like in our implementation, we have 2 states. One of them is startup and the other is routine. And when we're in the routine state, it means that we're authoritative. So we only want to advertise contents of that zone with the advertising proxy when we're in the authoritative state. If we fall out of the authoritative state, we have to stop advertising. And so this is, it's a little bit complicated, but the question is, do we mention this in this document or do we mention this in the replication document? The reason that I suggest mentioning it in this document is that the replication document is not really specific to advertising proxies. We don't have to have an advertising proxy with replication. So do we want to specify advertising proxy behavior in that document or in this document? So if we did it in this document, I think what we would say is it's only appropriate to behave as an advertising proxy for a zone for which the advertising proxy server is authoritative. And we can make reference to, examples of that, but that would be the language that I would want to put in here if we did that. So that's just a thing to think about. Like, this document is actually, it's pretty simple. It's pretty close to done, I think. Like, there's a lot of issues here, but I don't think any of them are super hard. So I'd like to get to the point where we've resolved all of these issues and can publish. And in order to do that, we need to kind of just, answer some questions like this. I take it that means we're done.
Yeah. Looks good, Ted, on your last proposal. So.
Okay, yeah, so thank you. If you have any thoughts on any of these issues, please follow up on the list. And welcome, Donald. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to go a little quickly here in the interest of time. So I'm Donald Eastlake, Independent, and this is about the DNS 60 RR and what's happening there. You guys know a lot more about how it's used in DNSSD than I do. So next slide.
So I've given you slides.
Or I can, I'll sorry, I have control. Okay. Let's see, oops. Okay, so it's a meta resource record, which means that it's something not stored in zones. Sometimes called a pseudo resource record, but actually can appear in messages. And its purpose is for signing the message using a private key. And the corresponding public key can be included in the message as it is in DNSSD usually, or it can be included in zone data and various other things. And these use the old RR code numbers for signature and key. There are newer ones called RR, SIG, and DNS key, which are not used by this. So this is just sort of shows what actually happens. The DNS SIG on a request can be used to sign the request body. This is very high level. There's a bunch of little details here that I'm not covering. You can also use it for transaction security, where you sign the response and the request together. And when you verify that signature, you know that the request got through, and this is the response to that request. It's used for indicating that you have authority to do an update. For example, in some cases, for a DNS zone update, where you have a key that's related to the authority on either updating the whole zone or updating part of the zone. It's also used in SRP for this first come first serve, where you basically sort of register a name and then you have authority to update things on that name in that zone. And you can use it just for host-based message integrity and authentic and security, where the key is just associated with the requester host on the request and the server host on the result and the response. And you can tell that they are authentic. So I'll skip this slide in the case of time. So why is anything happening to this? The existing SIG0 is from RFC 2931, not too recent. It doesn't have any separate error field, unlike various other message security related RRs. So there are cases where you might want to signal a separate error from the overall one in the DNS header. So you want a field really in or associated with the RR. And it has no original ID field, and I'll get to why that's a problem a bit later. So there's a draft currently, which is 2931 bis. Does various things. It removes a statement in the original RFC that TCP support is optional, which I guess basically implies that it's required. And generally, TCP support is required in the DNS this time for a variety of reasons. It adds an EDNS0 option, which can be used to carry this original ID and can be used to return an additional error value. There's a section added on how to handle forwarding DNS servers. That's basically sort of cloned from the TSIG considerations for forwarding servers. That case may not occur in DNSSD, but it's important in general. And lastly, it changed it to permit multiple SIG zeros in a DNS message, and I'll explain why in a sec. It does not allow multiple TSIGs or a SIG0 and a TSIG, but if you have a TSIG, you can also have more than one TSIG. And there's a separate draft going through currently that might get merged, which is a way to indicate the state of the key, whether it's being negotiated, it's been being evaluated, or whatever. So there are these two drafts going through. This is sort of an example of why you might want multiple TSIGs, and why, if you have a requester and a server and you're sending things through, and you have a DNS forwarding server in the middle, you might want to provide for basically authentication or integrity checking on between the requester and the forwarder, which is the A and D SIG0. Sorry, the B and D SIG zeros here. So that's easy, and that's fine. And there's a request ID in the message here, and the same one will be in the return from the forwarder, so you can verify it quite easily. But if what you're really trying to do is, say, update something that's 2 hops away, then you need to have a signature that gets all the way through. And when the server over here on the right is trying to verify this request, the signature covers the original ID that was in the original message. So that needs to somehow get through to that far server. And if it does, then it can validate it and produce a valid response that has a signature that can be validated when it gets forwarded back to the requester. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, very quickly, given the time constraints. And if there's any points on things that DNSSD would like done or clarified or whatever in relation to any of this, I'm open for questions.
So Ted Lemon, I have a bit of a question. So we actually do have a use case for forwarding. in SRP, which is that SRP depends somewhat on validating the source of the message. And so if there are multiple hops, then that validation would depend on the message coming from something that's on the same hop, which would have to be a forwarder. The way I was planning on solving this was simply by forwarding the message unchanged. So in other words, the EDNS 0 signature applies to the message. The message is not modified, and the signature does not include the source or destination addresses of the message. And so I didn't think that I needed to do an additional signature. I see the utility of being able to represent the second ID, but I'm curious as to what motivated that.
Well, if you're forwarding a message, you don't necessarily have to have multiple signatures. You can just have a single signature. I mean, in this case here, the security between the requester and the forwarder could be used TSIG or nothing at all, or whatever local thing you have there. So forwarding it through is fine. The problem is that the signature covers the request ID, which is in the DNS header and not in the anywhere in the data part. And normally, then the forwarder forwards it. It's got a new DNS ID, and as a result, when the server tries to verify the signature, it'll fail because it won't be the same. So you have to look at exactly what subfields are covered by the SIG0 to see that is a problem. But anyway, the addition of this change in the RFC 2931 bis will solve that. I mean, it seems like there's a detail we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not quite sold on that, but we can discuss that off list.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I've just started a show of hands just to ask you whether you're interested in working on improving SIG0. So please answer that, and then we will be essentially finished. And while you're doing that, so if you recall at the start of the meeting, we pointed you to SNAC. So there'll be a presentation of some work related to DNSSD there. You may also have seen that there was a side meeting for later this afternoon. Also on this topic, that side meeting has been cancelled, so it's only going to be presented in tomorrow's SNAC meeting. Okay, so we have 6 people interested in working on improving SIG0 and another 6 with no opinion.
Nobody said no.
I guess the magic question is this in charter?
Well,
so we're making no determination at the moment. But that concludes this session. So thank you for joining, and we will see you on the list.